The black water of Oak Ridge Lake swallowed Mason Williams whole, 16 years old, and dying in the same spot his mother had 4 years earlier. Irony, he thought dimly, as his lungs screamed for air. His cramping legs refused to kick. The surface light grew dimmer above him. In his fading consciousness, Mason saw movement, something small and determined cutting through the murky depths toward him. Kaiser. The German shepherd puppy he'd treated so poorly. The dog his father had struck with stones just yesterday, leaving a gash across its thin ribs. Yet here was Kaiser, barely 6 months old and underfed, plunging through the darkness to reach him. Mason's vision tunneled as the puppy's teeth clamped onto his shirt collar. His last coherent thought before blackness took him. Why would you save me when all we did was hurt you? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Mason Williams had once been the golden boy of Oak Ridge, Illinois, a straight-A student with an easy smile and a future as bright as the championship trophies he'd helped bring to the local high school swim team. That was before the lake took his mother, before the whispers started, before his father became a stranger who reeked of whiskey and regret. The Williams family home, a handsome 2-story colonial at the end of Maple Street, had once hosted neighborhood barbecues and holiday gatherings. Now the peeling paint and overgrown lawn told the story of the family's descent as clearly as the empty bottles Floyd Williams no longer bothered to hide. At 16, Mason had grown tall but thin, his shoulders perpetually hunched as though carrying an invisible weight. The only time he stood straight was when he was alone with Kaiser, the scrawny German shepherd puppy his Aunt Claire had given him 3 months ago, against his father's wishes and his grandmother's vocal objections. "The boy needs something to love," Claire had insisted, placing the trembling puppy in Mason's arms. "Something that loves him back without condition." Cordelia Williams, who had moved in after her daughter-in-law's death, had sneered at the sentiment. A severe woman with silver hair pulled tight in a bun, she ruled the household with bitter efficiency. "Animals are filthy," she'd declared, "and expensive. We're not made of money since that woman left us with nothing but debts and disgrace." That woman. Never Sarah, never Mom. Always that woman, as though erasing her name could erase the fact that she had once been the heart of their family. Floyd had only relented about keeping Kaiser after Mason's therapist suggested animal companionship for his PTSD and anxiety. And even then, the conditions were clear. The dog stayed outside, received the cheapest food, and would be gone at the first sign of trouble. What no one had anticipated was how Kaiser's presence would become both salvation and catalyst. The small creature whose unconditional love would ultimately force the Williams family to confront the lies they'd been living with for 4 long years. Lies about Sarah Williams' death. Lies about who they had become in her absence. Lies that were about to unravel in ways none of them could have imagined. Mason's fingers trembled as he dabbed antiseptic on Kaiser's shoulder, wincing as the puppy flinched beneath his touch. The wound, a jagged gash where his father's thrown rock had connected yesterday evening, was still raw and angry. In the dim light of the old tool shed, Mason could see it wasn't the only mark on the dog's thin body. Scattered scars told the story of the past 3 months in the Williams household. "Easy, boy," Mason whispered, blinking back tears. "I know it hurts. I'm sorry they hate you so much." Kaiser didn't whimper. Despite everything, the dog's amber eyes watched Mason with complete trust, his tail offering a weak thump against the wooden floor. Mason reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of beef jerky he'd smuggled from the kitchen. "You're supposed to be a fierce guard dog, you know," Mason said with a sad smile as Kaiser gently took the offering. "German shepherds are supposed to be tough, not forgiving." The shed door creaked open suddenly, sending a shaft of early morning light across them. Mason instinctively moved to shield Kaiser, relaxing only when he saw Aunt Claire's silhouette. "I thought I might find you two out here," she said softly, stepping inside and closing the door. She knelt beside them, her nurse's hands gently examining Kaiser's wound. "Your father again?" Mason nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "He was drunk. Kaiser barked when Dad tripped on the porch steps. He said the dog was mocking him." Claire's jaw tightened, but her voice remained calm. "I brought proper bandages from the hospital. And these." She pulled out a small bottle of antibiotics. "Crush one into his food twice a day. Don't let your grandmother see." "She hardly lets him eat at all," Mason said bitterly. "Last night she accidentally knocked over his bowl, then told me it was wasteful to refill it." Claire placed a gentle hand on her nephew's shoulder. "I'm working on something, Mason. I can't explain yet, but things won't always be this way. I promise." Before Mason could ask what she meant, a bellow came from the house. "Boy! Where the hell are you?" Claire quickly helped Mason finish bandaging Kaiser. "Go. I'll make sure he gets back to his spot without your father seeing him." Mason hugged Kaiser once more before slipping out of the shed. As he hurried across the backyard, memories washed over him. Of the day Kaiser had arrived, small enough to fit in his two hands, a gift that had brought the first genuine smile to his face in years. The dog had been prescribed as companion therapy after Mason's panic attacks had worsened. 4 years after his mother's drowning, Mason still couldn't go near the lake, still woke gasping for breath from dreams of dark water. Doctor. Winters had been specific. A companion animal gives trauma survivors something to care for. It pulls them out of their own pain. The routine of care provides structure. The physical contact reduces anxiety. What the doctor hadn't accounted for was the Williams household. Floyd's alcohol-fueled rages, Cordelia's cold disdain, the way Kaiser had become a convenient target for all their unresolved grief and anger. "Where were you?" Floyd demanded as Mason entered the kitchen. His father sat at the table, already nursing his first drink of the day despite the early hour. At 45, Floyd Williams looked 60. His once handsome face bloated, eyes bloodshot, the strong hands that had once taught Mason to fish, now perpetually trembling. "Just getting some air," Mason mumbled. "With that mutt, I bet," Cordelia said as she entered, her tone sharp as she placed a plate of toast before her son. "You spend more time with that animal than with your schoolwork." "My grades are fine," Mason said, reaching for a piece of toast. Cordelia slapped his hand away. "Wash up first. That dog probably has diseases." Mason bit back a retort and headed to the sink. Through the window, he could see Claire leading Kaiser to the doghouse in the far corner of the yard, a ramshackle structure Mason had built from scrap lumber. It barely kept out the rain, but it was the best he could do. After breakfast, Mason headed upstairs to finish homework, pausing at his mother's old bookshelf. Behind a row of novels, he kept a small box containing the only photo of his mother that hadn't been removed from the house. Sarah Williams laughing, her arms around a 12-year-old Mason at his swim meet. Beside the photo lay a folded letter he'd found last week while searching for an old swimming medal in his mother's jewelry box, a box Cordelia thought she'd disposed of years ago. Mason hadn't had the courage to read it fully yet, but the first lines had been enough to make his heart race. "If anything happens to me, know that it wasn't an accident. Cordelia has been—" The rest remained unread. Some part of him feared what truths might lie in his mother's final words. A crash from downstairs pulled Mason from his thoughts. Cordelia's sharp voice carried up the stairwell. "Disgusting animal! Floyd, look what it's done now!" Mason raced downstairs to find Kaiser cowering in the doorway while Cordelia stood over a spilled bag of dog food, the cheap kind she begrudgingly purchased each month. "I caught it trying to break into the pantry," she spat, although Mason could see she'd deliberately opened the back door to let Kaiser in, creating this scenario. "He's hungry," Mason said, moving toward the dog. "You haven't let me feed him since yesterday morning." "Don't you dare clean this up," Cordelia warned, stepping deliberately on the scattered kibble. "The beast can go hungry until it learns." Something in Mason snapped. "His name is Kaiser, not it or beast, and he's hungry because you keep throwing away his food." "Don't you raise your voice to your grandmother," Floyd growled from his armchair, not even looking up from his tumbler of bourbon. "She's starving him, just like she—" Mason stopped himself, but the unspoken accusation hung in the air. Cordelia's eyes narrowed. "Just like what, Mason? Go ahead. Say what you're thinking." "Nothing," Mason muttered, kneeling to comfort Kaiser. "No, I want to hear it," Cordelia pressed, her voice dangerously quiet. "Just like I what? Poisoned your precious mother? Pushed her into the lake? Is that what your Aunt Claire has been whispering to you?"
"Enough!"
Floyd roared, suddenly on his feet. "All of you out! Take that damn dog and get out of my sight before I put it down myself." Mason's feet carried him automatically toward Oak Ridge Lake, Kaiser trotting faithfully at his heels despite the lingering pain from his injuries. The irony wasn't lost on him, seeking refuge at the very place that haunted his nightmares. Yet the old willow tree at the lake's eastern shore had been his mother's favorite spot, and somehow, sitting beneath its sweeping branches made Mason feel closer to her. The June sun beat down on his shoulders as he settled against the tree trunk, Kaiser curling up beside him. From this vantage point, the lake looked deceptively peaceful. Sunlight dancing across its surface, a family of ducks paddling near the reeds. Hard to believe that somewhere in its depths, his mother had taken her last breath. "Accident," the police report had said. "Possible suicide," the town gossips had whispered. But Mason had never believed either explanation. His mother had been a strong swimmer who taught at the community pool. And she'd never shown signs of depression, quite the opposite. She'd been making plans, talking about a family trip to the Grand Canyon that summer. With trembling fingers, Mason withdrew the folded letter from his pocket. For a week he'd carried it with him, reading and rereading the first line, but too afraid to continue. Today, with his grandmother's thinly veiled threat still ringing in his ears, he unfolded it completely. "If anything happens to me, know that it wasn't an accident. Cordelia has been stealing from your trust fund, Mason. I found the records hidden in her guest room when I was cleaning yesterday, nearly $50,000 gone already. When I confronted her, she threatened me. I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow, but I wanted to document everything first. I've made copies of all the evidence and left them with Claire. I haven't told your father yet. He idolizes his mother, and I need to have everything in order before I—" The letter ended abruptly, as if Sarah had been interrupted. The date at the top, June 17th, was the day before she died. Mason's hands shook so badly the paper rattled. Kaiser whined softly, pressing against his leg in canine concern. "She knew," Mason whispered, stroking Kaiser's head. "Mom knew what Grandma was doing, and then she—" The sound of approaching bikes interrupted his thoughts. Mason hastily refolded the letter and tucked it away as Elijah, Carter, and Tyler rode up, their bikes kicking up dust on the lakeside path. "Yo, Williams, thought you were grounded for life," Elijah called out, dropping his bike and flopping down beside Mason. At 17, Elijah Porter had been Mason's best friend since kindergarten, one of the few who hadn't drifted away after Sarah's death and the subsequent rumors. "Dad's 3 sheets to the wind already," Mason replied with a shrug. "I doubt he'll notice I'm gone." "Brought the mutt, huh?" Carter asked, eyeing Kaiser with mild disdain. Unlike Elijah, Carter Daniels had never been comfortable around dogs. "His name's Kaiser," Mason corrected automatically. "Whatever," Carter said, already pulling off his t-shirt. Anyone up for a swim? It's hot as hell today. Mason tensed. Though he sat by the lake often, he hadn't been in the water since his mother died. His friends knew this. It was an unspoken rule that they never pushed him on it. "I'll pass," Mason said quietly. "But you guys go ahead." Tyler Monroe, the newest addition to their group since moving to Oak Ridge last year, was already stripping down to his swim trunks. "You seriously never swim? Man, how do you survive these Illinois summers?" "Drop it, Tyler," Elijah warned. But Tyler, oblivious to the undercurrents, continued as he waded into the shallows. "Water's perfect today." Not even cold. Mason watched them with a hollow feeling in his chest. He used to love swimming, had been on track for a scholarship before his mother's death left him unable to even put his face underwater without panic setting in. "Hey, who's up for jumping from the point?" Tyler asked, pointing toward a rocky outcropping that jutted into the deeper part of the lake. "Looks like a sweet diving spot." An uncomfortable silence fell. The point was where they'd found Sarah's body. "That's off limits," Elijah said sharply. "The currents are dangerous there." "Says who?" Tyler challenged. "Looks fine to me." "Says the 3 people who drowned there in the past decade," Carter interjected, "including Mason's mom." Tyler's face fell as understanding dawned. "Shit, man. I didn't know. I'm sorry." Mason stared at the rocky outcropping, something stirring within him. 4 years of avoiding it, 4 years of nightmares. 4 years of letting fear control him, while his grandmother manipulated his entire family. "I'll do it," he heard himself say. 3 shocked faces turned toward him. "What?" Elijah asked, certain he'd misheard. "I said I'll do it. I'll jump from the point." Mason stood, a strange calm settling over him. If his mother had been murdered for discovering the truth, the least he could do was face the place where it happened. "Mason, no way," Elijah protested, scrambling out of the water. "You haven't even swum in years. That's at least a 20-foot drop into deep water." "I know how to swim," Mason insisted, already walking toward the path that led to the outcropping. Kaiser followed, whining anxiously. "Stay, Kaiser. Stay with Elijah." The dog reluctantly obeyed, though his ears remained flat against his head in distress. The walk to the point took less than 5 minutes, but to Mason it felt like crossing into another world. Each step brought flashes of memory. Police divers, yellow tape, his father's anguished cries when they brought Sarah's body to shore. When he reached the edge, Mason looked down at the dark blue water below. From this height he could see the swirling pattern of the underwater current his mother had warned him about countless times. "Mason, don't!" a woman's voice carried across the water. He turned to see Aunt Claire running along the shoreline, her face pale with fear. How had she found him? Had she followed him from the house? "Get away from there!" she shouted. Something in her voice, raw panic beyond normal concern, made Mason hesitate. She knew something, maybe everything. But it was too late to turn back. His friends were watching. The point stood beneath his feet. His mother's last moments had played out here, and Mason had spent 4 years running from the truth. He took a deep breath, raised his arms above his head in perfect diving form, one last tribute to the woman who'd taught him to swim, and leaped. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs. The cold was shocking, enveloping him instantly. For a moment, muscle memory took over, and Mason moved through the water with the practiced strokes of his childhood. Then the current caught him, stronger than he'd anticipated, and simultaneously both legs seized with vicious cramps. Years of inactivity, the sudden exertion, the cold water, all conspired against him. Pain shot through his calves and thighs as his muscles contracted violently. Mason's head slipped beneath the surface. He fought to resurface, managed one desperate gasp and a half-formed cry for help before the water claimed him again. Through the murky blue he could see sunlight above, growing dimmer as he sank. On shore, Kaiser broke free from Elijah's restraining hand and raced toward the water, barking frantically. Without hesitation, the injured, malnourished puppy plunged into the lake, swimming with desperate determination toward the spot where Mason had disappeared. Floyd Williams had just poured his third bourbon of the morning when the phone rang. He let it ring, assuming Cordelia would answer it, but the shrill sound continued uninterrupted. With a muttered curse, he lurched from his armchair and grabbed the receiver. "Williams' residence," he slurred. "Floyd, it's Claire." His sister-in-law's voice was tight with urgency. "Mason's at the lake." "The point, Floyd. He's going to jump from the point." The glass slipped from Floyd's fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor. "What did you say?" "I followed him after your blow-up this morning. He's with his friends, but he's walking to the point right now. You need to get here. Now." The line went dead. Floyd stood frozen for a moment, his alcohol-fogged brain struggling to process what he'd heard. The point, where Sarah had been found, where his son, who hadn't so much as dipped a toe in water for 4 years, was about to jump. "Cordelia!" he shouted, already moving, snatching his keys from the hook by the door. "Cordelia!" His mother appeared at the top of the stairs, her face a mask of irritation. "Stop bellowing, Floyd. What is it now?" "Mason's at the lake. The point. I have to go." Something flickered across Cordelia's features, an emotion Floyd couldn't identify. "That boy is just acting out for attention. Let him." But Floyd was already out the door, his truck's engine roaring to life before she could finish. As he sped down Maple Street, screeching around corners with reckless abandon, Floyd was assaulted by memories he'd spent years drowning in whiskey. Sarah, radiant in her wedding dress. Mason at 5, learning to swim with Sarah's patient guidance. The day Mason won his first junior swim meet, Sarah and Floyd cheering from the stands. The police officer at the door, hat in hand. "I'm sorry, Mr. Williams." And then the memory he hated most, finding the letters in Sarah's desk drawer. Now love letters, supposedly, though Sarah had denied writing them. Letters that suggested she'd been planning to leave him, to take Mason and run off with another man. Letters that had been the last nail in the coffin of his faith in her, discovered the very day before she drowned. Floyd gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. For 4 years, he'd used those letters to justify his descent into alcoholism, his emotional abandonment of Mason, his surrender to his mother's increasing control over their lives. If Sarah had betrayed him so completely, what was the point of trying to be the man she'd once loved? But now, with the prospect of losing Mason too, doubt crept in for the first time. Had he been wrong? Had Sarah been telling the truth when she'd looked him in the eye and sworn she'd never seen those letters before? The truck skidded into the lakeside parking area, and Floyd leapt out, not bothering to shut the door behind him. He could see a small crowd gathered at the shoreline, Mason's friends, he guessed, and Claire. "Where is he?" Floyd bellowed as he ran toward them. Elijah pointed toward the water, his young face pale with shock. He jumped. He went under. The dog went in after him. Floyd followed the boy's gesture and saw ripples spreading from a spot about 50 yards out, and a small form struggling in the water. Kaiser. The dog he'd abused and resented was swimming desperately toward something beneath the surface. Without hesitation, Floyd kicked off his boots and dove into the lake. The cold sobered him instantly, adrenaline burning through the alcoholic haze. He swam with powerful strokes, surprising himself with strength he hadn't accessed in years. As he approached, he could see Kaiser struggling to keep something afloat, Mason's limp form, his face barely breaking the surface as the dog gripped his shirt collar. "I've got him," Floyd gasped as he reached them, taking his son from the exhausted puppy. Kaiser didn't relinquish his hold immediately, as if unwilling to trust this man who had only shown him cruelty. "It's okay, boy. I've got him now." The swim back to shore was torturous. Mason was dead weight in his arms, and Floyd's muscles, weakened by years of alcohol and inactivity, screamed in protest. Kaiser swam alongside, occasionally nudging Mason's head higher when it slipped too close to the water. By the time they reached the shallows, hands were waiting to help. Claire and the boys pulled Mason onto the shore while Floyd staggered out, collapsing to his knees beside his son. Mason wasn't breathing. "No, no, no," Floyd moaned, tilting Mason's head back. "Not you too. Please God, not you too." Claire, her nurse's training taking over, began chest compressions while Floyd delivered rescue breaths, tasting the lake water on his son's cold lips. Kaiser stood nearby, dripping and shivering, his eyes never leaving Mason's face. "Come on, son," Floyd pleaded between breaths. "Come back to me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." The distant wail of an ambulance siren cut through the air. Someone had called 911. But it would be minutes before they arrived, and Mason still wasn't breathing. Floyd continued the rescue efforts mechanically, his mind racing through fractured memories. Mason as a toddler, taking his first steps toward Sarah's outstretched arms. Mason at 12, proudly showing off the treehouse they'd built together before everything fell apart. Mason at 14, withdrawn and silent at Sarah's funeral, flinching away from Floyd's touch for the first time. "Please," Floyd whispered, not even sure who he was begging. "God, Sarah's ghost, the universe itself. I'll do anything. I'll stop drinking. I'll be the father he deserves. Just let him live." As if in answer to his prayer, Mason suddenly convulsed, water spewing from his mouth as he gasped for air. Floyd turned him onto his side, supporting him as he coughed and retched. "Mason, can you hear me, son?" Mason's eyelids fluttered, then opened. His blue eyes, so like Sarah's, focused first on his father, then shifted to the bedraggled puppy hovering anxiously nearby. "Kaiser," he croaked, reaching a weak hand toward the dog. Kaiser immediately moved closer, gently licking Mason's fingertips. The ambulance arrived in a flurry of activity. Paramedics swarmed around Mason, asking questions, taking vitals, preparing him for transport. "Family only in the ambulance," one stated as they lifted Mason onto a stretcher. Floyd hesitated, then scooped up Kaiser. "The dog comes too. He saved my son's life." The paramedic looked ready to argue, but something in Floyd's face must have convinced him it wasn't worth the fight. "Keep him out of the way." As they loaded Mason into the ambulance, Claire pulled Floyd aside. "We need to talk, Floyd. About Sarah. About what really happened." Floyd felt a chill that had nothing to do with his wet clothes. "What do you mean?" "Not now," Claire said, glancing toward the stretcher where Mason was being secured. "But soon, very soon." She pressed something into his hand, a folded piece of paper. "Mason had this. Read it. It's from Sarah." Before Floyd could respond, the paramedic called out, "Sir, we need to go now." Floyd clutched the paper and climbed into the ambulance, settling on the bench seat with Kaiser huddled against him. The dog was still shivering, whether from cold or exhaustion, Floyd couldn't tell. Impulsively, he removed his flannel shirt and wrapped it around the puppy, leaving himself in just a damp t-shirt. "You did good," he murmured, finding himself stroking the dog's wet fur. "You did real good, Kaiser." The ambulance doors closed, and they sped toward Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital, sirens blaring. Floyd unfolded the paper Claire had given him, immediately recognizing Sarah's neat handwriting. As he read, his hands began to shake, and not from alcohol withdrawal. "If anything happens to me, know that it wasn't an accident. Cordelia has been stealing from your trust fund, Mason." Floyd couldn't finish reading. The implications were too enormous, too devastating. He folded the letter again and slipped it into his pocket, his mind reeling. Could it be true? Had his mother been stealing from Mason's college fund, the money Sarah's parents had left in trust for their grandson? And if that was true, what else might be true? The ambulance arrived at the emergency entrance, and the next hour passed in a blur of activity. Mason was whisked away for examination and treatment. Floyd, still damp and increasingly aware of his disheveled, alcohol-reeking state, was directed to a waiting area. To his surprise, no one objected to Kaiser's presence, perhaps assuming the wet, exhausted dog was a service animal. "Mr. Williams?" A doctor appeared, clipboard in hand. "Your son is stable. He aspirated some water, but you and the others got to him quickly enough to prevent serious damage. We'd like to keep him overnight for observation, standard procedure with near-drowning victims." "Can I see him?" "In a few minutes. They're getting him settled in a room." The doctor hesitated. "Mr. Williams, your son was asking for someone named Kaiser. Is that—" Floyd glanced down at the puppy, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep against his leg. "This is Kaiser. He saved Mason's life." The doctor raised an eyebrow but nodded. "I see. Well, normally we don't allow pets, but given the circumstances, I think we can make an exception, provided the animal is clean and controlled." "He is. Thank you." After the doctor left, Floyd sat back, suddenly overwhelmed by fatigue. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the effects of his interrupted drinking were setting in. His hands were starting to shake, his head beginning to pound. But for the first time in years, he welcomed the discomfort. It was the price of clarity, and he needed to be clear-headed now more than ever. Floyd looked down at Kaiser, seeing the dog, really seeing him for the first time. The patchy fur where hair hadn't grown back over old injuries, the visible ribs beneath the wet coat, the raw wound on his shoulder where Floyd's own thrown stone had struck him just yesterday. And yet this abused, neglected creature had unhesitatingly risked his life to save Mason. "I've been a monster," Floyd whispered, gently touching Kaiser's head. The dog stirred slightly but didn't wake. "To both of you." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Williams, your son is asking for you. And, for his dog." Floyd carefully lifted Kaiser, who woke just enough to nestle against his chest before drifting off again. Following the nurse down the corridor, Floyd steeled himself for what he knew would be a difficult conversation with his son. Mason's room was dimly lit, the steady beep of a heart monitor providing a reassuring rhythm. He looked small in the hospital bed, an oxygen cannula beneath his nose, an IV in his arm. His eyes were closed when Floyd entered, but they fluttered open at the sound of footsteps. "Dad?" Mason's voice was raspy from coughing up lake water. "I'm here, son." Floyd moved to the bedside, still cradling Kaiser. "And so is someone else." Mason's face lit up when he saw the dog. "Kaiser! Is he okay?" "Exhausted, but yes." Floyd carefully placed Kaiser on the bed beside Mason. The puppy immediately snuggled against the boy's side, sighing contentedly before resuming his deep sleep. "Mason, I don't even know where to start." "You're sober," Mason observed quietly. The simple statement hit Floyd like a punch to the gut. Had his drinking become so constant that its absence was the first thing his son noticed? "Yes, and I'm going to stay that way." Floyd pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, his hands clasped tightly together to control their trembling. "Mason, what you did today. Going to the point. Why?" Mason looked away. "I found something. A letter from Mom, written the day before she died." "Claire gave it to me," Floyd admitted. "I've read it." He took a deep breath. "Mason, I need to know. Have you suspected your grandmother all this time?" "Not really," Mason said after a moment. "Not until I found the letter last week." but I always knew Mom would never have killed herself. And I never believed she was having an affair." He said the last words with difficulty, as if they tasted bitter. "The letters," Floyd began. "Were fake," came a voice from the doorway. Claire stood there, her face grim but determined. "Floyd, we need to talk. Now." Floyd looked at Mason, torn between staying with his son and hearing what Claire had to say. "Go," Mason urged. "I'm okay. Kaiser and I are just going to rest." In the hallway, Claire led Floyd to a small consultation room and closed the door. From her bag, she withdrew a thick manila envelope. "I've been investigating Sarah's death since it happened," she said without preamble. "At first, the police dismissed me as a grieving sister unable to accept an accident. But I knew Sarah would never have gone swimming alone that day. She was meeting me for lunch, for God's sake." She emptied the envelope onto the table. Photographs, documents, handwriting analyses. "The love letters you found? They were forgeries." "Oh, good ones, but forgeries nonetheless. Look at the handwriting analysis. The paper itself was from Sarah's stationery, but the writing wasn't hers. Someone who knew her handwriting well tried to imitate it." Floyd stared at the documents, the room seeming to tilt around him. "But who would—" "Cordelia," Claire said flatly. "I finally got access to the trust fund records last month. She's been systematically emptying it since before Sarah died, small amounts at first, then larger ones after she moved in with you. Nearly $200,000 is gone, Floyd. Money that was meant for Mason's future." Floyd sank into a chair, his legs no longer able to support him. "That's impossible. My mother wouldn't—" "She did," Claire interrupted. "And when Sarah discovered it, Cordelia silenced her. I can't prove that part yet, but the financial records are clear. Sarah confronted Cordelia on June 17th, the day she wrote that letter to Mason. The next day, she was dead." Floyd's mind raced back to that terrible day. He'd been at work when the call came. Sarah had gone for a walk by the lake, supposedly to clear her head after their argument about the letters. He'd found those damning letters the night before, confronted her. She'd denied everything, begged him to believe her. He hadn't. The last words he'd spoken to his wife had been cruel, accusing. "Sarah kept telling me to talk to you directly, not to listen to what your mother was saying," Floyd remembered, his voice hollow. "But I was so angry, so hurt by those letters." "Letters that Cordelia made sure you would find," Claire said quietly. "Think about it, Floyd. Who had access to Sarah's desk? Who had the most to gain if Sarah was discredited in your eyes? Who needed to silence Sarah before she could tell you about the missing money?" Floyd buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed by the implications. His mother, the woman he'd trusted implicitly, whose counsel he'd followed all his life, had manipulated him, stolen from his son, and possibly— "No," he whispered. "She couldn't have. Not murder. Not my own mother." Claire's expression softened slightly. "I don't know exactly what happened at the lake that day, Floyd, but I know Sarah would never have gone there alone, not when she was supposed to be meeting me. Someone lured her there, and given what we know now—" Floyd stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I need to get back to Mason." "Floyd, not now, Claire. I need time to process this, to think." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Thank you. For never giving up on Sarah. For looking out for Mason when I wouldn't." Claire nodded, gathering the documents back into the envelope. "Mason needs you now, Floyd. Sober and clear-headed. Whatever you decide to do about Cordelia, remember that." As Floyd walked back to Mason's room, his mind churned with conflicting emotions, grief for Sarah renewed and sharpened by guilt, rage at his mother if Claire's accusations were true, and shame at what he'd become in the wake of it all. Most of all, he felt a desperate need to make things right for Mason, to be worthy of the second chance he'd been given today. At the door to Mason's room, Floyd paused. Inside, his son was sleeping peacefully, one arm draped protectively over Kaiser. The dog lifted his head as Floyd entered, his amber eyes watching warily, as if assessing whether the man who had caused him so much pain could be trusted near his beloved boy. "I'll do better," Floyd promised softly, addressing both the sleeping child and the vigilant dog, "for both of you. I swear on Sarah's memory I'll do better." Kaiser tilted his head, considering, then slowly lowered it back onto Mason's chest, his eyes never leaving Floyd's face. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in 4 years, that felt like enough. The hospital waiting room seemed to shrink as Floyd paced its length, his hands jammed deep in his pockets to hide their trembling. 6 hours had passed since Mason's near drowning. The doctors were running final tests before releasing him in the morning, and Floyd had stepped out to clear his head and to confront the mounting evidence that threatened to shatter what little remained of his world. Claire sat nearby, her fingers tapping restlessly against the manila envelope in her lap. She hadn't left the hospital, despite Floyd's assurances that he was staying sober, that he wouldn't abandon Mason again. Perhaps she didn't trust those assurances. Floyd couldn't blame her. "We need to talk about what happens next," Claire finally said, breaking the tense silence. "Cordelia's still at your house. She has no idea what we know." Floyd stopped pacing and dropped heavily into the chair opposite her. "I still can't believe my own mother." "Look at the evidence yourself," Claire said, pushing the envelope toward him. "The financial records don't lie, Floyd. Sarah discovered the embezzlement the day before she died. That's not a coincidence." Floyd reluctantly took the envelope, pulling out bank statements and transaction records. Even with his limited financial knowledge, the pattern was obvious. Small withdrawals at first, $500 here, $1,000 there, gradually increasing in both frequency and amount after Sarah's death. All authorized with Cordelia's signature as secondary trustee, a role she'd assumed when Mason's maternal grandparents had died 3 years before Sarah. $200,000, Floyd murmured, the reality sinking in. "She stole my son's inheritance, money that was meant for his education. And she forged those letters to turn you against Sarah," Claire added quietly. The handwriting analyst confirmed it. "The pressure patterns, the letter formation, they're close, but they don't match Sarah's writing." Floyd closed his eyes, remembering that final terrible argument with Sarah. Her tear-streaked face as she swore she'd never seen the letters before, never even met the man who'd supposedly signed them. How she'd begged Floyd to believe her, to trust their 15 years of marriage over a handful of suspicious pages. And he hadn't. God help him, he had chosen to believe the worst. "I failed her," Floyd whispered, his voice breaking. "I failed Sarah, and then I failed Mason." "You were manipulated," Claire said, though her tone held little sympathy. "Cordelia knew exactly which buttons to push. Your insecurities about Sarah marrying beneath her station. Your fear that she'd eventually leave you for someone more successful. That doesn't excuse what I became afterward." Floyd ran a hand over his face, feeling the stubble of a day without shaving. "The drinking, the way I treated Mason and Kaiser," he trailed off, ashamed. "No, it doesn't," Claire agreed. "But you have a chance to make it right now. Starting with Cordelia." Floyd nodded slowly, determination replacing the shock and denial. "I need to confront her. Get a confession if I can." "You need to be careful," Claire warned. If she realized Sarah had discovered her theft and was willing to silence her permanently, what might she do if cornered? A chilling thought struck Floyd. Mason, If she suspects he knows about the letter, he's safe here tonight, Claire assured him. I've already spoken with hospital security. No visitors except you and me until discharge. Floyd's shoulders sagged with temporary relief, but another worry immediately took its place. Kaiser. I left him with Mason, but the nurse said they'd need to remove him when visiting hours ended. I arranged for him to stay, Claire said. Called in a favor with Dr. Landon. Kaiser's officially a therapy dog for tonight. For the first time in years, Floyd felt a surge of genuine gratitude toward his sister-in-law. Thank you. Claire nodded, her expression softening slightly. You know, Floyd, Sarah never stopped believing in you, even at the end, when you'd stopped believing in her. She told me once that beneath all your self-doubt was the strongest, most loving man she'd ever known. She paused. I haven't seen that man in 4 years, but I think he might be coming back. Floyd swallowed hard against the knot in his throat. I want to be that man again. For Mason. For Sarah's memory. Then let's deal with Cordelia, Claire said, gathering the documents back into the envelope. Tomorrow, when Mason's discharged, we go to the police with everything we have. But tonight I'm going home to face my mother, Floyd finished, standing up with newfound resolve. I need to know the truth, Claire. All of it. Even if it destroys me. It won't destroy you, Claire said firmly. The truth about Sarah can only set you free. The Williams house was dark except for a single light in the kitchen when Floyd pulled into the driveway. He sat in his truck for a long moment, steeling himself for the confrontation ahead. His hands shook, but not from alcohol withdrawal, from the rage and grief that had been building since reading Sarah's letter. The front door opened before he reached it. Cordelia stood in the doorway, her silver hair immaculate as always, her face a mask of practiced concern. Where have you been? She demanded. I've been worried sick. Is Mason all right? Floyd regarded his mother carefully, searching for signs of the monster Claire believed her to be. All he saw was the woman who had raised him after his father died, who had guided every major decision in his life, including, he now realized, his response to Sarah's death. Mason's fine, he said evenly. No thanks to me. You can't blame yourself for the boy's recklessness, Cordelia said, stepping back to let him enter. Jumping from that point, he knew better. Did he? Floyd moved past her into the kitchen, noting the half-empty bottle of bourbon on the counter. His usual evening companion, Cordelia had poured him a glass, ready for his return, ready to ensure he remained dulled and compliant. Or did he just want answers about his mother? Cordelia's expression didn't change, but Floyd caught the slight stiffening of her shoulders. What are you talking about? Instead of answering, Floyd reached into his pocket and withdrew Sarah's letter. He placed it carefully on the kitchen table between them. Mason found this, he said quietly. Sarah's last letter, written the day before she died. Cordelia glanced at the paper but made no move to touch it. More of Sarah's dramatics, I suppose. That woman always did have a flair for— That woman was my wife, Floyd interrupted, a hard edge entering his voice. Mason's mother. And she discovered something about you, didn't she, Mother? Something about Mason's trust fund. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Floyd watched his mother's face, saw the calculations happening behind her eyes, weighing options, considering denials, measuring his resolve. You're upset, Cordelia finally said, her tone conciliatory, and probably still in shock from today's events. Why don't you have that drink, and we can discuss this when you're calmer? I'm not drinking anymore, Floyd stated flatly. I'm done drowning the truth, Mother. I want to know what happened to Sarah. I want to know where Mason's money went, and I want to know now. Something shifted in Cordelia's demeanor, the mask of maternal concern slipping to reveal a colder, harder expression. You've been talking to Claire, I see. Always interfering, that one. Never could mind her own business. This is my business, Floyd insisted. My wife, my son, his future that you stole. I borrowed from the trust, Cordelia corrected sharply. After everything I've done for this family, I was entitled to compensation. The Winters' fortune should have come to me when Harold died, not been locked away for a grandchild who was already being spoiled rotten by Sarah. The casual admission stunned Floyd. He had expected denials, not this calm justification of theft. You stole $200,000. I made investments, Cordelia countered. Unfortunately, some didn't pan out as expected. But I would have replaced it eventually. And the letters, Floyd pressed, his voice growing harder, the ones that made me believe Sarah was unfaithful? Were those just investments too? For the first time, Cordelia looked genuinely uncomfortable. You were too blinded by that woman to see what she was doing to you. Turning you against me, questioning my every decision, someone needed to open your eyes. So you forged letters from a non-existent lover, Floyd said, the pieces finally falling into place. You made me believe Sarah was leaving me, that everything we had was a lie. I did what was necessary, Cordelia insisted, her chin lifting defiantly. Sarah was going to ruin everything. She found the bank statements and threatened to go to the police, to have me charged with theft, my own daughter-in-law, after everything I'd done for her. Floyd felt sick as he realized his mother wasn't even trying to deny her actions anymore. She was justifying them. What happened at the lake, Mother? Did you follow her there? Cordelia's eyes narrowed. Be very careful what you're implying, Floyd. I'm not implying anything, Floyd said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. I'm asking directly, did you kill Sarah? The slap came so quickly Floyd didn't have time to react. Cordelia's hand connected with his cheek, the sharp sting momentarily shocking him into silence. How dare you? She hissed, her composure finally cracking. I am your mother. Floyd touched his cheek, feeling a strange calm descend over him. Yes, you are, and I need to know what you did to my wife. Something in his tone must have reached Cordelia because she stepped back, suddenly wary. You have no proof of anything. A melodramatic letter from a woman who was clearly unstable. Financial records that only show I was managing family assets. You think the police will believe you? A drunk who's neglected his son for years over me? They'll believe the forensic accountant Claire hired, Floyd countered. They'll believe the handwriting expert who confirmed the letters were forgeries. And they'll be very interested in why you directed me to find those letters the night before Sarah died. Cordelia's face paled. You can't prove I had anything to do with her drowning. It was ruled accidental. Was it an accident, Mother? Floyd pressed, stepping closer. Or did you follow her to the lake that day? Did you argue about the money? Did she threaten to tell me the truth? What happened, Mother? Did she slip, or did you push her? She was going to destroy our family. Cordelia suddenly exploded, her voice rising to a shout. All I did was ask her to meet me at the lake to discuss things rationally. I tried to reason with her, to make her understand that the money was rightfully mine. But she wouldn't listen. Floyd felt the blood drain from his face as his mother continued, the words pouring out in a torrent of long-suppressed justification. She said she had copies of everything, that she'd already talked to a lawyer, that I would go to prison. Cordelia's eyes were wild now, lost in the memory. I just wanted her to stop talking, to understand what she was doing to this family. I reached out to grab her arm to make her listen to me, and she stepped back, too close to the edge. You pushed her, Floyd whispered, horror washing over him. It was an accident, Cordelia insisted, but her eyes shifted away. She lost her balance, fell into the water. I tried to help her, but she was panicking, thrashing around. By the time I could have reached her, she'd gone under. You let her drown, Floyd said, his voice hollow with disbelief. You watched my wife drown, and then you came home and comforted me, helped me plan her funeral, moved into our home and took over our lives." "I protected you," Cordelia corrected, her chin lifting defiantly. "I protected this family, just as I've always done. Sarah would have ruined everything with her accusations. I did what was necessary." Floyd stared at his mother, this woman he'd trusted implicitly his entire life, and saw a stranger. A calculating, cold-blooded stranger who had destroyed his family to protect herself. "Mason nearly died today," he said quietly, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage, "at the same spot where his mother drowned. My son almost died because of the lies you've been feeding us for 4 years. Mason will be fine," Cordelia dismissed with a wave of her hand. "He's young, resilient, and now that this nonsense is out in the open, we can put it behind us and move forward as a family. You'll see that I only ever had your best interests at heart." The casual disregard for Mason's life, for Sarah's death, for the years of pain Cordelia had orchestrated, it was the final straw. Floyd reached for the phone on the kitchen counter. "What are you doing?" Cordelia demanded. "Calling the police," Floyd answered, dialing with steady fingers. "It's over, Mother. All of it." Cordelia's face contorted with fury. "You wouldn't dare. I'm your mother." "Everything I did for you." "No," Floyd said as the line connected. "You did it for yourself, and now you're going to answer for it." As he gave the dispatcher their address, Floyd watched his mother's expression transform from rage to calculation to something approaching panic. For the first time in his adult life, he was acting contrary to Cordelia's wishes, defying her control. And in that defiance, he found a strength he'd forgotten he possessed. The strength Sarah had always seen in him, even when he couldn't see it himself. "They're on their way," he said after hanging up. "I suggest you get whatever you need. You won't be coming back to this house." "This isn't over, Floyd," Cordelia warned, her voice low and dangerous. "You have no idea what you're doing." "I'm finally doing what I should have done 4 years ago," Floyd replied. "I'm believing in my wife. I'm protecting my son. I'm being the man Sarah always knew I could be." And as the distant wail of police sirens reached them, Floyd realized he was finally free of the fog that had surrounded him since Sarah's death, the fog of alcohol, grief, and his mother's manipulation. Clear-eyed at last, he could begin to rebuild what Cordelia had so methodically destroyed. His relationship with Mason, his faith in himself, and the truth about the woman he had loved and lost. Cordelia Williams sat rigidly in the back of the police cruiser, her hands cuffed in her lap, her eyes fixed straight ahead. Through the window she could see Floyd standing on the porch, answering questions from a detective. He hadn't looked at her since the officers had led her out of the house. Not once. Inside the Williams home, Detective Lisa Morales carefully bagged Sarah's letter as evidence while her partner continued interviewing Floyd. The kitchen felt surreal to Floyd. The same space where he'd eaten breakfast with Sarah and Mason thousands of times, where family holidays had been celebrated, where he'd sat drinking himself numb for 4 years. Now, it was a crime scene. "Mr. Williams, we'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement," Detective Morales said, closing her evidence kit. "For now, I understand you need to get back to your son at the hospital." Floyd nodded, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "What happens next?" "With my mother? She'll be held overnight and arraigned in the morning," the detective explained. "The financial crimes are clear-cut from the documents you and Ms. Winters provided. The homicide investigation is more complicated. After 4 years, physical evidence will be limited." "She confessed to me," Floyd said hollowly. "And recanted to us," Detective Morales reminded him gently. "Claimed she was just telling you what you wanted to hear to calm you down. Said you were drunk and threatening her." Floyd's jaw tightened. I haven't had a drink since this morning." "I believe you," she assured him. "But the county prosecutor will need more than a recanted confession to charge her with murder. We'll reopen the investigation, interview witnesses, see if the medical examiner can reassess the original findings." As the police finally departed with Cordelia, Floyd stood alone in the silent house. The weight of the day, Mason's near drowning, the revelations about his mother, the reopening of wounds he'd spent years trying to numb, crashed down on him all at once. His legs gave way, and he sank to the kitchen floor, back against the refrigerator where Sarah's shopping lists used to hang, and wept like he hadn't since the day they'd pulled her body from the lake. When the storm of grief finally passed, Floyd found himself staring at the bourbon bottle Cordelia had left on the counter. The amber liquid called to him with familiar promises: oblivion, temporary escape, the blessed absence of feeling. His hand actually twitched toward it before he caught himself. With deliberate movements, Floyd stood, took the bottle, and emptied it down the sink. Then he methodically searched the house, finding Cordelia's hidden stash of gin in her bedroom, his own emergency whiskey in the garage, the scotch in his office desk. One by one he poured them all away, watching the alcohol disappear down the drain. By the time he finished, dawn was breaking. Floyd showered, changed into clean clothes, and headed back to the hospital to bring his son home. The drive from Oak Ridge Memorial to the lake house took 20 minutes. Mason sat in the passenger seat, still pale but alert. Kaiser curled on his lap despite hospital regulations against discharging a patient with an animal. No one had dared separate them. "Claire's meeting us at the house," Floyd explained as they turned onto Maple Street. "She has some things to tell you, about your mom, about what we've learned." Mason nodded, stroking Kaiser's fur. "Is it true? About Grandma?" Floyd's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Yes, it's true." "All of it?" Mason pressed. "The money? The letters? The lake?" "She admitted everything to me last night," Floyd confirmed, his voice strained. "The police have her in custody now." Mason fell silent, processing this information. After a moment, he asked quietly, "Does this mean Mom didn't want to leave us? She wasn't seeing someone else?" The question broke Floyd's heart. For 4 years, he'd allowed Mason to believe the whispers about Sarah, had practically confirmed them with his behavior. "No, son. Your mother loved us. She never wanted to leave. Those letters were forgeries. Grandma's attempt to turn me against her." "And it worked," Mason said, not accusingly, just stating a fact. "Yes," Floyd admitted, the single word laden with regret. "It worked. I failed your mother, Mason, and then I failed you. I can't change the past, but I swear to you, things will be different now." As they pulled into the driveway, both noticed the unfamiliar car parked at the curb. Claire stood on the porch, talking with an older man in a suit. "Who's that?" Mason asked. "I'm not sure," Floyd replied, frowning as he parked. They approached cautiously, Kaiser trotting protectively at Mason's side. The dog's demeanor had changed subtly since the lake incident, more alert, more watchful, as if he'd assumed the role of guardian rather than victim. "Floyd, Mason," Claire greeted them, her expression hard to read. "This is James Harmon. He was Sarah's attorney." The man stepped forward, hand extended. "Mr. Williams, I've been trying to reach you for quite some time." Floyd shook the offered hand, confusion evident on his face. "Sarah's attorney? I didn't know she had one." "She retained me 4 years ago, just days before her death," Harmon explained. "When I heard about Cordelia's arrest this morning, I knew it was finally time to execute Sarah's contingency instructions." "Contingency instructions?" Floyd repeated, bewildered. Harmon nodded gravely. "Sarah came to me concerned about financial irregularities in Mason's trust fund. She suspected Cordelia was embezzling and feared confronting her directly. She asked me to prepare documentation and, if anything happened to her under suspicious circumstances, to deliver certain materials to you. But that was 4 years ago, Mason interjected. Why are you only coming forward now? The attorney looked uncomfortable. I did try, son, multiple times. But your grandmother always intercepted my calls, said your father was too grief-stricken to deal with legal matters. When I persisted, she threatened legal action against my firm for harassment. And without an official investigation into Sarah's death, you had no standing to insist, Claire finished for him. Until today. Precisely, Harmon confirmed, opening his briefcase. I have Sarah's sworn affidavit detailing her discoveries about the trust fund, bank records she'd gathered. And this, he withdrew a sealed envelope, which she instructed me to deliver personally to Floyd in the event of her death. Floyd took the envelope with trembling hands, recognizing Sarah's handwriting immediately. His name was written across the front in her elegant script. There's more, Harmon continued. Sarah made a video statement in my office the day she retained me. She was afraid, Mr. Williams, afraid but determined to protect her family. A video? Floyd whispered, struggling to comprehend. Of Sarah? Harmon nodded. I have it with me. She wanted you and Mason to see it together if her fears proved justified. The world seemed to tilt beneath Floyd's feet. After 4 years of nothing but memories and photographs, the thought of seeing Sarah moving, speaking, looking into the camera, it was overwhelming. Dad? Mason's voice pulled him back to the present. The boy looked both frightened and hopeful. Kaiser pressed reassuringly against his leg. Let's go inside, Floyd managed, finding his voice. Please, Mr. Harmon, we'd like to see it. In the living room, once bright and filled with family photos, but now sparse and neglected under Cordelia's austere influence, they gathered around Harmon's laptop. Claire sat beside Mason on the sofa, her arm around his shoulders. Floyd remained standing, too tense to sit. Kaiser positioned himself at Mason's feet, alert and watchful. Harmon opened a video file, adjusted the volume, and stepped back. The screen flickered, and then there she was. Sarah Williams, blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing the blue blouse Floyd had always loved, her expression serious but determined. Floyd felt his breath catch at the sight of her, so vibrant, so alive. My name is Sarah Winters Williams, she began, her voice clear and steady. Today is June 16, 2021. I'm recording this statement because I fear for my safety and potentially my life. Mason made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Claire tightened her arm around him. If you're seeing this, Sarah continued, something has happened to me. Floyd, Mason. Her composure wavered slightly when she spoke their names. I love you both more than anything in this world. What I'm about to say will be difficult to hear, but you need to know the truth. For the next 10 minutes, Sarah methodically outlined her discovery of Cordelia's embezzlement from Mason's trust fund. She explained finding the unauthorized transactions, confronting Cordelia, and the older woman's threatening response. She said I would regret interfering, Sarah recounted, her blue eyes so like Mason's, hard with determination. That I didn't understand what she was capable of protecting her family, as if Mason and Floyd aren't my family too. The video Sarah detailed her plan to meet with Floyd that evening, to show him the evidence, but also her fear that Cordelia might intercept her. If something happens to me, she said, looking directly into the camera, do not believe it was an accident. And Floyd, her voice softened, don't let her poison our son against my memory. Fight for him. Fight for the truth. Be the strong, loving man I know you are. As the video ended, The room fell silent except for Mason's quiet crying. Floyd stood frozen, Sarah's final plea echoing in his mind. Be the strong, loving man I know you are. Words of faith from a woman who had seen something in him worth believing in, even as she faced the threat that would ultimately take her life. And for 4 years, he had failed that faith completely. Mom knew, Mason whispered, breaking the silence. She knew Grandma might hurt her, and she made this video to protect us. He looked up at his father, tears streaming down his face. But we didn't protect her. The accusation, unintentional but devastating in its truth, hit Floyd like a physical blow. He sank to his knees before his son, eye to eye for the first time in years. You're right, he admitted, his voice raw with emotion. We didn't protect her then, but we can honor her now by finding justice, by healing, by becoming the family she always believed we could be. He hesitated, then added, If you'll give me another chance, Mason. If you'll let me try to be the father she knew I could be. Mason looked at his father, really looked at him, seeing past the years of neglect to the man struggling to emerge from grief and guilt. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. Kaiser, sensing the emotional shift, moved to place himself between them, his muzzle nudging first Mason's hand, then Floyd's, as if giving permission for reconciliation or perhaps offering his own forgiveness. As Floyd reached out to embrace his son for the first time in 4 years, Sarah's voice seemed to echo around them, a benediction and a challenge. Be the strong, loving man I know you are. The news of Cordelia Williams' arrest spread through Oak Ridge with the speed and force of a summer thunderstorm. By nightfall, the story had made the evening news, complete with archived footage of Sarah's drowning investigation from 4 years earlier. By morning, reporters had gathered outside the Williams home, hungry for details about the prominent widow who had allegedly murdered her daughter-in-law and stolen from her own grandson's trust fund. Floyd and Mason watched the coverage from Claire's apartment across town, where they'd retreated for privacy. Kaiser lay between them on the sofa, his head resting protectively on Mason's lap. The dog had barely left the boy's side since the lake incident. The community is shocked by these allegations, the local anchor was saying. Cordelia Williams has been a respected figure in Oak Ridge for decades, serving on the hospital board and the Historical Society. Police are re-examining the circumstances surrounding Sarah Williams's drowning, which was initially ruled accidental. Floyd muted the television as Mason's shoulders tensed. We don't have to watch this. I want to, Mason insisted, his voice quiet but firm. I need to know what people are saying. Why? Claire asked gently, bringing mugs of hot chocolate from the kitchen. What matters is the truth, not gossip. Mason accepted the mug but didn't drink. Because for 4 years, people have been whispering about Mom, saying she was depressed or unfaithful or that she abandoned us on purpose. His voice cracked slightly. I want them to know they were wrong. Floyd felt the familiar stab of shame. He had done nothing to defend Sarah's memory all these years, had even privately fueled the rumors with his descent into alcoholism and bitterness. People had looked at him and thought, no wonder she wanted to leave him. They'll know, he promised Mason. The truth will come out at the trial. Your mother's name will be cleared. Mason nodded, but his expression remained troubled. What if there isn't enough evidence? What if Grandma gets away with it? It was the question that had kept Floyd awake most of the night. The financial crimes were indisputable, the paper trail too clear, too damning. But the murder charge was more tenuous. After 4 years, physical evidence would be nearly impossible to recover. Without witnesses, it would be Cordelia's word against a dead woman's fears. Mr. Harmon believes your mother's video testimony will be powerful evidence, Claire said, sitting beside Mason. Combined with the letter she wrote you and the timing of everything, it builds a compelling case. But it's all circumstantial, Mason countered, surprising them with his legal knowledge. I've been researching online. Without direct evidence, prosecutors might settle for the financial charges and drop the murder investigation. Floyd and Claire exchanged glances. At 16, Mason was thinking with a clarity and maturity that shamed them both. "We'll fight for justice," Floyd assured him, "no matter how long it takes." The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Claire went to answer it, returning moments later with Detective Morales. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said, declining Claire's offer of coffee, "but we've had a development I thought you should hear from me directly." Floyd stood, his body tense. "What's happened?" "There was an incident during prisoner transport this morning," Morales explained, her professional demeanor softening slightly as her eyes moved to Mason. "Mrs. Williams asked to use the restroom at a gas station. When the female officer accompanied her inside, Cordelia somehow slipped away through a back exit." "She escaped?" Mason asked, his voice rising. Kaiser immediately pressed closer to him, sensing his distress. "Temporarily," Morales clarified. "We issued an immediate bolo, that's be on the lookout, and Highway Patrol spotted her car heading west on Interstate 70 within 30 minutes. "So you have her in custody again?" Floyd asked, relief evident in his voice. The detective's hesitation was answer enough. There was a pursuit. Mrs. Williams refused to pull over, accelerated to dangerous speeds. Near the Willow Creek Bridge, she lost control of the vehicle. The room fell silent as they absorbed the implication. "Is she dead?" Mason finally asked, his voice surprisingly steady. "No," Morales replied, "but she's in critical condition at County General. The doctors aren't optimistic about her chances." Floyd sank back onto the sofa, a storm of conflicting emotions washing over him. Part of him, a dark, vengeful part he wasn't proud of, felt a grim satisfaction that his mother might face a higher justice than human courts could provide. Another part remembered the woman who had bandaged his childhood scrapes, who had held him when his father died, who had somehow twisted that maternal love into something possessive and ultimately destructive. "Can we see her?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. Morales nodded. "She's under guard, but family is permitted. I should warn you, though, she's unconscious on life support. The neurologist doesn't believe she'll regain consciousness." "I want to go," Mason said unexpectedly. Floyd turned to his son in surprise. "Mason, you don't have to—" "I need to," the boy interrupted, his young face set with determination. "I need to see her, even if she can't see me." Floyd understood then that this wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation. This was Mason's need for closure, to look upon the face of the woman who had taken his mother, and in many ways his father too, to confirm that her power over their family was truly ending. "All right," he agreed. "We'll go together." County General's intensive care unit was eerily quiet, the only sounds the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the mechanical whoosh of ventilators. Detective Morales had accompanied them, along with Claire. Kaiser had been left at the apartment despite Mason's reluctance to be separated from him. "She's in room 4, the detective said, nodding to the uniformed officer stationed outside the door. "Take as much time as you need." Floyd hesitated at the threshold, suddenly uncertain. What did he hope to accomplish by seeing his mother in this state? What could possibly be said to a woman who had destroyed so many lives, including her own? Mason seemed to have no such reservations. He walked straight to the bedside, looking down at the frail figure with an expression that combined bewilderment and grim fascination. Cordelia Williams was almost unrecognizable. Her silver hair, always so meticulously styled, had been partially shaved for the cranial surgery that had attempted to relieve pressure on her brain. Tubes and wires connected her to a battery of machines. Her skin had a grayish pallor, and dark bruises bloomed across what was visible of her face. "She looks small," Mason observed quietly. Floyd moved to stand beside his son. It was true. The commanding presence that had dominated their household for years was gone, leaving only a broken elderly woman tethered to life by medical technology. "The doctor says there's extensive brain damage," Claire murmured from behind them. "Even if she survives, she'll never be the same." Floyd nodded, finding it difficult to reconcile this helpless figure with the calculating woman who had orchestrated Sarah's death and manipulated him for years afterward. "I want to talk to her," Mason said suddenly. "Privately." Floyd exchanged glances with Claire, who nodded encouragingly. "We'll be right outside," he told Mason, squeezing his son's shoulder before stepping into the hallway with his sister-in-law. Once alone with his grandmother, Mason pulled a chair close to the bed. He sat silent for several minutes, simply studying Cordelia's face, searching perhaps for some sign of the woman who had once baked his favorite cookies, who had taught him to play chess, who had also incomprehensibly destroyed his family. "I found Mom's letter," he finally said, his voice low but steady. "I know what you did. I know you took my money. But more importantly, I know you took her from us. And then you took Dad, too, in a different way." The ventilator continued its rhythmic whooshing, the only response to his words. "I've been trying to understand why," Mason continued. "Was it really just about money? Or did you hate her that much? Was it because she loved Dad and me more than she feared you?" He leaned closer, his next words barely above a whisper. 4 years, Grandma. 4 years of watching Dad drink himself numb every night. 4 years of hearing people talk about Mom like she was selfish or crazy. 4 years of nightmares about that lake." Mason's composure began to crack, his voice trembling slightly. "I almost died there too. Did you know that? At the exact same spot. And you know what's crazy? Kaiser, the dog you hated, the dog Dad threw rocks at because of how you poisoned him, Kaiser jumped in to save me. A puppy that everyone except me treated like garbage showed more loyalty, more love than you ever did." He fell silent again, watching the monitors track Cordelia's failing vital signs. After a moment, he stood and placed something on the bed beside her hand, a small, worn photograph of Sarah holding a much younger Mason, both smiling broadly at the camera. "I don't forgive you," he said with quiet finality. "I don't think I ever will, but I'm not going to let what you did define the rest of our lives. Dad's sober now. We're going to fix what you broke, and Mom's name, her memory. It's going to be honored the way it always should have been." With those words, Mason turned and walked out of the room without looking back. In the hallway, Floyd immediately enveloped his son in a tight embrace. He didn't ask what had been said. The damp spots on Mason's cheeks told him enough. "Detective Morales wants to talk to us," Claire said gently after giving them a moment. "There's been another development." They followed her to a small waiting area where Morales sat with a folder open on her lap. Her expression was difficult to read, a mixture of professional detachment and what might have been sympathy. "We executed a search warrant on Cordelia's private storage unit this morning," she explained, "based on financial records showing monthly payments to a facility across town. We found something I believe belongs to you, Mason." She handed him a thumb drive, labeled simply Sarah. "There was a laptop there as well," Morales continued. "Password protected, but our tech team managed to access it. It appears your grandmother kept detailed records of her activities, including a journal entry from June 17th, 2021. "The day Mom died," Mason whispered, clutching the thumb drive. Morales nodded gravely. "It's a full confession, Mr. Williams." Explicit details of her confrontation with Sarah at the lake, the struggle that led to Sarah falling into the water, and her decision not to help, to let her drown. Floyd closed his eyes, the confirmation of his darkest suspicions hitting him with physical force. She wrote it all down. Why would she document her own crime? Some perpetrators do, Morales explained, especially those who feel justified in their actions. The journal entries read like she was vindicating herself, explaining her necessary choices. She genuinely seemed to believe she was protecting your family, her vision of what your family should be. Mason looked down at the thumb drive in his hand. And this? What's on this? We didn't access it fully out of respect for your privacy, Morales said. But from what we could see, they appear to be videos Sarah made for you. Birthday messages, life advice, memories she wanted to preserve. Dozens of them, spanning several years before her death. Mason's breath caught audibly. She made videos for me? All this time Grandma had them? It seems your grandmother found them on Sarah's personal laptop after her death, Morales confirmed. She kept them, perhaps as leverage, perhaps as another way to control the narrative about your mother. As Mason stared at the small device containing his mother's voice, her image, her thoughts preserved for him, a nurse emerged from Cordelia's room, her expression solemn. "Family of Cordelia Williams?" she inquired. Floyd stood. "Yes, I'm her son." "I'm very sorry," the nurse said gently. "She's gone. She passed a few moments ago." The finality of those words settled over them with strange weight. Not grief exactly, that would perhaps come later in complex and unexpected ways, but a sense of an ending, a terrible chapter of their lives closing, even as new possibilities opened before them. Mason looked from the thumb drive to his father, his expression a mixture of sorrow and cautious hope. "She can't hurt us anymore," he said softly. "Any of us." Floyd nodded, placing his arm around his son's shoulders. "Let's go home, Mason. We have a lot of healing to do." As they walked out of the hospital into the bright afternoon sunlight, they carried with them both the burden of tragic truths and the unexpected gift of Sarah's preserved voice, a voice that would, at long last, be heard. 6 months had transformed the Williams house. Gone were the heavy drapes Cordelia had insisted upon, replaced by light, gauzy curtains that allowed the December sunshine to pour through the windows. Sarah's photographs, once hidden away in boxes, now adorned the walls again. Her smiling face watching over the living room, the kitchen, the hallways. Fresh paint and warm colors had erased the austere palette Cordelia had preferred. Most significantly, the liquor cabinet stood empty, repurposed to store Mason's growing collection of swimming trophies. After 4 years away from the sport, he had returned to the water, facing his fears with the same quiet determination that had seen him through the past tumultuous months. Floyd stood at the kitchen window watching snow drift lazily onto the backyard. From this vantage point, he could see the lake in the distance, its surface frozen into a smooth mirror reflecting the winter sky. The sight no longer filled him with dread. Like the house itself, the lake had been reclaimed, transformed from a site of tragedy to a place of healing. Kaiser, now fully grown into a handsome young German shepherd, trotted into the kitchen and nudged Floyd's hand with his nose. No longer the scrawny, frightened puppy who had endured stones and harsh words, Kaiser had blossomed under proper care. His coat gleamed with health, his amber eyes bright with intelligence and affection. "He wants his morning walk," Mason said, entering the kitchen in his pajamas and tousled hair. At 16 and a half, he seemed taller, his shoulders broader, the haunted look in his eyes gradually giving way to something approaching peace. "Breakfast first," Floyd insisted, gesturing to the pancakes he'd prepared. "You've got the regional qualifying meet today. Need your strength." Mason grinned, sliding into his seat at the table. "Coach thinks I might have a shot at breaking the school record in the 200 freestyle." "Your mother would be proud," Floyd said, the words coming easily now, no longer accompanied by the sharp pain they once carried. She always said you were a natural in the water. They ate in companionable silence, broken only by Kaiser's hopeful whine as he watched for falling scraps. The easy domesticity of the scene would have been unimaginable 6 months earlier, when they had returned to a house emptied of Cordelia's presence, but still heavy with the weight of all she had done. Those first weeks had been the hardest, sorting through Cordelia's belongings, discovering additional evidence of her deceptions, facing the public scrutiny as the full story emerged in the press. Floyd had battled withdrawal symptoms, his body rebelling against sobriety even as his mind embraced it. Mason had suffered nightmares, waking in the night calling for his mother or crying out as he relived his near drowning. Through it all, Kaiser had been their constant, their anchor. The dog slept beside Mason's bed, alert to every restless movement. He stayed close to Floyd during the worst of the withdrawal shakes. When reporters grew too persistent, Kaiser's deep, warning bark had been enough to send them retreating down the driveway. "Aunt Claire's coming for dinner tonight, right?" Mason asked, breaking Floyd's reverie. Floyd nodded, clearing their empty plates. "And Dr. Winters. And I thought maybe we'd invite Elijah and his folks too to celebrate after your meet." "Like a real Christmas gathering," Mason observed with a small smile. "Mom would like that." "She would," Floyd agreed, his throat tightening slightly at the thought of Sarah's love for the holidays. The decorating, the baking, the carols she'd play nonstop from Thanksgiving until New Year's. This would be their first real Christmas celebration since her death. After breakfast, they bundled up against the December chill for Kaiser's walk. The three of them made their way down to the lakefront, following the path that wound along the shore. Kaiser bounded ahead, delighting in the fresh snow, occasionally returning to check on them before racing off again. "I've been thinking," Mason said as they walked, "about Mom's videos." Floyd glanced at his son. The thumb drive Detective Morales had given them had indeed contained dozens of video messages Sarah had recorded for Mason. Birthday wishes, life advice, memories she wanted to preserve. They had watched them together, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, always grateful for this unexpected gift of Sarah's voice and presence. "What about them?" Floyd asked gently. "I want to share them at the memorial service next week," Mason replied. "Not all of them. Some are too personal. But the ones where she talks about her hopes for our family, her love for the community, I think people should see who she really was, not the version Grandma created." Floyd felt a surge of pride at his son's wisdom and generosity. The memorial service had been Mason's idea, a way to properly honor Sarah now that the truth about her death was known. The town had rallied around them, eager to make amends for years of gossip and judgment. "I think that's a beautiful idea," Floyd said. "Your mother would be honored." They had reached the point, that jutting rocky outcropping that had featured so prominently in their family tragedy. Once a place of fear and painful memories, Floyd and Mason had deliberately reclaimed it over the past months, visiting regularly, sometimes talking about Sarah, sometimes sitting in companionable silence. Today, they paused there, looking out over the frozen expanse of the lake. Kaiser, sensing the solemnity of the moment, sat quietly between them. "Do you think she knows?" Mason asked softly. "Mom, I mean. Do you think she knows we finally learned the truth? That we're okay now?" Floyd considered the question carefully. Before Sarah's death, faith had played only a peripheral role in their lives. Christmas and Easter services, the occasional prayer in times of trouble. But in recent months, both he and Mason had found themselves drawn to the comfort of belief, the hope that Sarah's spirit somehow continued. "I do," Floyd answered finally. "I believe she knows." I believe she's been watching over us all along, through our darkest times and now, as we find our way back to the light." Mason nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. After a moment, he pulled something from his pocket, a small, worn photograph of Sarah, the same one he had placed beside Cordelia in the hospital. "I've been carrying this everywhere since Mom died," he explained, "like a talisman or something. But I think I don't need it anymore. Not because I'm forgetting her, but because I feel her with me now, without needing the reminder." Floyd watched as his son knelt and carefully tucked the photograph into a small crevice in the rocks, sheltered from the snow. "This is where she left us," Mason said quietly. "So this is where I'll leave this piece of her. But the rest, her love, her memory, who she was to us, that comes home with us." The simple ceremony brought tears to Floyd's eyes. He placed his hand on Mason's shoulder, unable to find words adequate to express his feelings. Kaiser whined softly, pressing against Mason's leg in canine comfort. As they turned to head back to the house, Floyd spotted a figure approaching along the path. Claire, bundled in a red scarf and winter coat, waving as she saw them. "I thought I might find you two here," she called as she drew nearer. "I wanted to drop off the memorial service programs before heading to my shift at the hospital." She joined them, a little breathless from her brisk walk in the cold air. Kaiser greeted her enthusiastically, his tail wagging as she scratched behind his ears. "They look perfect," Mason said, examining the simple program with its photograph of Sarah on the front. Smiling, vibrant, captured in a moment of joy at a family picnic the summer before her death. "The whole town's talking about the service," Claire told them. "I think the church will be packed. Sarah touched so many lives, and people want to honor her properly now that they know the truth." "We have you to thank for that," Floyd said sincerely. "You never stopped fighting for her, even when I couldn't." Claire shook her head. "Sarah would have done the same for me. That's what family does. They stand by each other. They fight for the truth." She smiled at Mason, then at Kaiser. "Sometimes family comes in unexpected forms." The four of them walked back to the house together, their footprints marking a path in the fresh snow. Inside, the warmth enveloped them immediately. The physical warmth of the heater Floyd had finally repaired, but also the emotional warmth of a home reclaimed from grief and deception. While Claire and Mason chatted about the upcoming swimming meet, Floyd moved to the mantelpiece where a special photograph now held the place of honor. It showed Sarah holding a newborn Mason, with Floyd's arm around them both, their first portrait as a family. Beside it stood a newer photo. Floyd and Mason at the lake this past summer, Kaiser between them, all three looking toward the camera with cautious happiness. "Two versions of our family," Floyd thought. "Both real, both precious." Later, as Claire departed with promises to see them at the swim meet, Floyd found Mason in the living room setting up Sarah's old laptop. The boy had started a project of digitizing all the family photographs, creating slideshows set to Sarah's favorite music. "Need help?" Floyd offered, settling on the sofa beside his son. "I've got it," Mason assured him. "But you can stay if you want." Kaiser jumped up to join them, settling with a contented sigh across both their laps. As Mason worked, Floyd found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The pain wasn't gone, might never be completely gone, but it had transformed into something bearable, even meaningful. The anger had gradually given way to forgiveness, not of Cordelia's actions, but of themselves for the years spent in darkness. "Dad?" Mason's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "I've been thinking about something else, too." "What's that?" "Kaiser," Mason said, scratching the dog's ears affectionately. "What he did for me at the lake. I was thinking maybe he could help other kids, too." "There's a therapy dog training program at the community center. They work with traumatized kids, kids who've lost parents or experienced other stuff. Floyd looked down at Kaiser, who gazed back with those intelligent amber eyes that seemed to understand far more than a dog should. The dog who had saved Mason despite months of mistreatment. The dog who had, in many ways, saved them both. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Floyd said. "Kaiser has a gift for healing. It would be selfish to keep that to ourselves." Mason smiled, the expression reaching his eyes in a way it hadn't for years. "Mom would like that too, I think, using our pain to help others." "She would," Floyd agreed. That was Sarah all over, finding the light in the darkness, the blessing in the struggle. As the snow continued to fall outside, blanketing their world in pristine white, Floyd Williams felt something he had thought forever lost to him. Hope. Not the fragile, tentative hope of early recovery, but something deeper and more resilient. Hope for Mason's future. Hope for his own continuing sobriety and redemption. Hope that Sarah's legacy would live on through them both. And as Kaiser dozed contentedly across their laps, Floyd silently thanked the loyal creature who had taught them perhaps the most important lesson of all. That love, true love, expects nothing in return, forgives the unforgivable, and saves even those who don't believe they deserve saving. In the quiet of that December afternoon, surrounded by memories of what was lost and evidence of what had been regained, Floyd finally felt at peace. The journey wasn't over. Healing rarely followed a straight path. But for the first time in 4 years, he believed in the possibility of joy. And that, he knew, would have made Sarah prouder than anything else. In our twilight years, we've learned that life's most profound lessons often come wrapped in our deepest wounds. The Williams family's journey, from betrayal to redemption, reminds us that it's never too late to reclaim what was lost. Floyd's struggle with alcoholism and grief speaks to anyone who's used unhealthy coping mechanisms to numb their pain. Mason's resilience shows us that our grandchildren possess wisdom beyond their years, if only we have the courage to listen. And Kaiser, this loyal German shepherd who saved his abuser's son, teaches us that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's the ultimate strength. Perhaps you too have family fractures that seem beyond repair. Perhaps you've carried guilt or grief or anger for decades, believing some bells cannot be unrung. But this story whispers a powerful truth. Healing begins the moment we face our past honestly. It's never too late to mend broken relationships, to speak truth after years of silence, to create new memories alongside the painful ones. Like Floyd standing at that frozen lake, we can choose to see our past not as a prison, but as the foundation for a more authentic future. The path forward isn't forgetting, it's remembering with love instead of bitterness.